North Yorkshire, Boston Spa. I'm very grateful that everybody is phoned in and connected online for this morning. The first time I'm doing one at this time of the day. I've got some like 10, 12 slides which we're going to go through, but hopefully we'll be discussing the issue as we go. Haven't put in any polls or questions, but if there are any comments that you would like to make, just put them into the chat box. Questions, feedback. If you think I'm wrong, I really would like to hear from you as well. But I will get underway. I think it's always best to I've just pressed the button on my keyboard and nothing has happened. It's a new. I have to click the next button on the screen, which I'm doing. If you've met me before or been to one of the CIPD events or one of the webinars before, you'll know an awful lot about this. But I would just thought for anybody new, I will remind you a little bit about me. That is me on the right-hand side of your screen. That's done a couple of years ago, so a little less hair and a little less waistline at the moment. I am a member of the Chartered Institute of Personal Development and coming to the end of 6 years as a branch chair in North Yorkshire. I started my career in Yorkshire in the NHS and qualified for the CIPD. I've got a question there from Jackie about the access code.
Don't worry, I'll find that.
Richard, thank you.
That, Michael, don't worry.
Thank you. I've just put my whole career onto one PowerPoint slide. So basically, I started my career in the NHS in Yorkshire and then qualified the CIPD. The old logo went off around the world, came back into the UK and started my own business, Abacida. You can see the Abacida brands on the left-hand side. The brands in the middle, I'm an ambassador for the National Training Awards, which are now called the Princess Royal Training Awards. Branch chair with the CIPD. A national council member and doing some various different projects with them on a pro bono basis. And then also delivering training for the Institute of Leadership Management, Chartered Management Institute. And I developed a range of training products with The Simpsons, the only business-to-business product they've approved. Developed training products with Bloomberg, where we take the news and convert that into case studies. So for management and leadership development, I do things with the BBC on local radio and television, talking about HR issues. So we're doing all those sorts of things. Now, what we're going to talk about this morning is learning and what approach is best. And when I started to look into what I was going to be doing, I thought like, okay, well, people are going to expect a list of different types of learning activities. Is that what you're expecting? A list of different types of learning activities and looking for me to explain which ones are best for different identifiable needs. And then which ones work best in different situations and which ones are best for different types of people. I thought you might be looking for me to tell you that. And then which ones are the most cost or time effective. And of course, which ones are free? That's always very important. Did I get that right? Are those the sorts of things that you're expecting? You put yes, no in the, yes, good, thank you. Anybody else is that what you're all expecting? Yeah. Yeah, okay, right, okay. Anyone else got different expectations, or is that the sort of thing that everybody is looking for this morning? Okay. Right. Okay. Looks like that is the sort of thing that you're expecting. And I'm sorry, but when I started to look into this in detail, it sort of started to appear that that's not really what we need to be looking at as trainers. I'm sorry. But learning and development departments are starting to look increasingly old-fashioned. And that's because the way in which people are learning is changing. The way in which they look for ideas and how they can develop. There was, when I started in training and development, people would say, I need to learn something. I'll go to the training department and find out what it is they can do for me. And now people are much more independent and much more looking at different ways in which they can do things by themselves. They're not as reliant upon you as trainers or HR people. They're not looking for you to provide the solution, much more willing to go out and find it for themselves. And that changes the whole emphasis and all the activities of the training function and the HR people within organizations. You no longer create a list of courses and wait for people to book onto them. It's no longer a case of saying, this is what's convenient for us to provide. This is what our business plan says that we've got to do. You have to think about what they want to learn. And motivated learner is someone who's decided that they want to do something. And so 49% of employees would not recommend their employer's learning and development provision. That's like essentially half of people in organizations don't think that their learning function is doing a particularly good job. 33% of people are neutral about it, but only 18% like the learning that their employers provide. And that seems to be that the information that they're getting fits with what they need to learn at their particular point in time. I should say I've got lots of percentages, lots of statements, lots of things. We've gone through all sorts of different reports from all the big consultancies, Bain, McKinsey, KPMG, PwC, EY, looked at all sorts of things from the CIPD, from the Society of Human Resources Management, from various different training organizations, software companies, looking at the different sorts of things. And most of this comes from Bain on this particular slide. So looking at saying that 49% of employees would not recommend their employer's learning and development provision. 33% are neutral about it, and 18% like the learning that their employers provide. Now, when I take that information and tie that in with something from the CIPD that said that one of the major reasons that people change jobs is that they're looking for some sort of development. They are not getting the development opportunities that they're looking for at their own employers. They're thinking, like, I need to move on. Money isn't going to make them move, but learning and development opportunities will. And as employers, as training and development people, we need to be very much aware that 49% of the people that we're responsible for aren't interested, don't recommend, don't think much of what we do. And when you add 33 to 49, you've got 82. And that's a huge number of people. So like saying, I wouldn't recommend what it is that you do for me. So what is it that they are doing? What is it that they're looking for? How do we need to change to create an approach which actually works for them? So what we need to do is look at how people are learning at the moment and how people learn individually. And at the moment, when people are learning, they're doing web searches. They're going to the library, right, is what we used to call it. Now the library is online and they do web searches for the information that they need at a particular point in time to do what they've been told to do. So they don't know how to do something, they go to the web. Did research last year in Leeds looking at 6 different industries as to how people learnt there. And across all 6, the main thing that people did was they went online to find a source that they could trust and look for the answer there. So if you haven't included web searches and created a database of sites that can be trusted for your people, you are not providing what it is that people are going to be looking for. Companies which restrict access to the internet for their employees are limiting the opportunity for those employees to develop. Right? Simple and straightforward. People are extremely comfortable with where it is that they're looking for work, for information. That's the internet. People search the net for information, for answers to questions. On a weekly basis, they're asking their colleagues. They're having interactions with peers, and those peers don't always have to be within the organization that they work. They can be past colleagues, they could be relatives, they could be friends, they could be somebody that they've met at an event who's now doing the similar job to them in another organization. There's much more sharing of information across peers. It is informal learning. It is sharing of experience, something that as a trainer, I've been trying to get people to do for years and trying to set up schemes to encourage people to do it, but actually people would do it by themselves. People are watching and they're reading online. They're reading articles in newspapers, magazines. They're doing blogs and reading blogs. Independent people who they go to and trust. They are again looking at online. A lot of this is online, weekly. You're watching videos. Somebody once told me that you can learn how to build a house on YouTube. It might not be a very good house. You might have all sorts of things wrong. And that's the big problem with the internet. There's very little accreditation. But people are using it as a source of information. And the best approach could be that you help manage their interaction with the resources that are out there. Perhaps you do the search before them. You find the information that they need, and then you provide them with the links through to information that you quite like, that you want everybody to read, but you want everyone to watch. And then, as we did with the Bloomberg product that I mentioned earlier, Right? We get people talking about it, whether that's face-to-face, whether that's over a cup of coffee, whether it's in an online networking group. Right? You get people talking about what they're finding. When you get into the monthly learning that people are doing, you're looking at books and ebooks. Right? You're looking at apps. You're looking at online networks, webinars and webcasts. So this morning, you're involved in a webinar as part of the monthly learning. You go into a situation where somebody has something, I hope, that you will find interesting. Webcasts, the recorded webinars. But again, we haven't actually looked at any type of formal training in the conventional sense. We haven't got them booking onto something which is a formal learning experience. We haven't got them going on and doing an e-course, right? E-learning. We haven't got them going into a classroom. That only happens quarterly. People are not doing the conventional learning. Most of these things can be done independently. All of these are done independently because this is the learning that employees are finding for themselves. Right? When they go to an employer and look for training, look for some sort of learning, what they're doing is much more conventional things. But they're looking for coaching on a monthly basis. They're looking for mentoring. Big difference between the two. Right? But they're looking very much, and so the same sort of thing where the weekly peer interactions, right? And then they're looking for monthly coaching and mentoring. So the formality of those exercises takes place on a monthly basis, but it's about communication. It's about sitting down with someone that you think can add some value to you. When you get into the monthly, quarterly type of activities, you're looking at e-learning and instructor-led learning. On e-learning, you have to be extremely careful. A lot of feedback about e-learning is you're telling me things I already know in order to get to the one piece of information that I need. Right? It's because we assume in e-learning that there is no knowledge. We start from a base point of zero knowledge and we try to build it up rather than looking at what is it that you need to learn today. And you can't get to that information in a lot of e-learning courses until you've gone through things you already know. The instructor-led learning can be one-to-one. It can be in a classroom. It can be internal. It can be external. It can be sitting down in a structured way with a colleague and learning, this is what you need to know. This is what I'm trying to learn. And then quarterly conferences, trade shows. I'm going to two conferences tomorrow in London. One in the morning, one in the afternoon, the other one the day after. I'm going to learn specific, going there with the target of learning specific things. Trade shows as well. And just walking around the stands, finding out what is new, finding out how other people solve problems. We're getting into a lot of informal learning, but you can learn an awful lot from going to a trade show, an awful lot from going to a conference. What people are saying there when they look at it is they're opening up their eyes to new ideas, not waiting to be told something, not talking about theories, but looking at what other people have done in practice. Right? What can we learn from the experiences of other people? Okay, but the majority of learning activities, when you compare those two slides, the majority of learning activity is employee-led, employee-driven, people going out and finding things for themselves. Right? It's not what an organization is providing themselves. Right? So, but then time. How much time do people spend learning? Because it used to be the case, well, I'd wait for the course and then I'd go on the course. 27 minutes per week on employer-provided learning, but 3.3 hours per week of own time on self-source learning. I'm no great mathematician, but even I know that that's an awful lot more time spent on self-source learning than reliance upon employers to provide that learning. What I find very surprising from my time of running training functions is that 75% of workers today are prepared to invest their own money in their own development. When I started in learning and development, it was very rare for an employee to pay for their own professional qualifications. It's very rare for them to pay for them to go onto a training course. Not something that people wanted to do. I'm going to learn this for the benefit of you, my employer. You should pay for it. And all sorts of clauses in learning contracts said if you leave within a period of time, you're going to have to pay it back. Created a lot of resentment. But now, people are paying for their own learning. They're investing in their own development, and that means perhaps when you think about what we were saying earlier on about learning being an important part of career development and where I decide to work, that perhaps means that people are not so much investing in themselves to be able to do their job better today, but they're investing in their careers to make themselves more attractive to another employer. And so one of the things as trainers that we need to work out is that we need to understand that the investment that people make is not necessarily for our benefit, but very much for their benefit and where they're going to be going next. Now, what we then have to look at in lots of ways is when and how do people learn. And the thing that struck me is that 84% of learning is done away from work. Right? You can be at home whilst you do a webinar, you can do e-learning whilst you're away, you can go to college, you can do all sorts of various different things. I'm very sorry about that ping there. I'll switch that off. Right. Sorry about that. 77% of learning takes place on a tablet or a telephone. So people on trains, people on buses, on airplanes. The buses around in Yorkshire provide free Wi-Fi. Right? Somebody commuting to work could be looking at a video, looking at an article, doing something which is actually helping them with their career, right, on their telephone. I have numerous stories of people buying books on CDs or downloading talking books and listening to them in their cars on their CD player or by plugging in the download, their phone into their in-car entertainment system and listening to the book on their way into work. 66% of learning is done in personal time. And so only a third of learning takes place in work time. Right? Less than 40% of learning actually takes place at work. So 61% of the time that people work, the time that people learn is done away from work. And 18%, almost a fifth of learning, is done during the commuting time. Right? People are making use of the time on the train, on the bus, whilst they're walking, whilst they're driving, they're learning things. And a lot of that learning is done for their own benefit to make themselves more attractive, make themselves more employable, either employable by you or employable by someone else if you don't value the learning that they are providing. Right? So I think we're looking at which approach is best. We start to build a picture that actually the conventional training courses, the conventional interventions that training and development people like to provide are fast running out of their credibility, and that we're starting to think, okay, we need to take a much more personal approach. We need to ask the individual employees, how would you like to learn? Which way do we need to facilitate that learning? And look at not just the learning, but when are you going to learn? And what is a feasible learning plan? So 84% away from work. You're not going to take up time during your day, right? You can do it on a tablet or a telephone. You're prepared to give up your personal time to do it, and you can utilize what would otherwise be time doing nothing, sitting out, looking out the window of the train or the bus, sitting in a traffic jam. You can actually be learning then as well. Lots of people are saying, yeah, I can make use of that time. So, Richard, then, what is going wrong? We're not providing the right time as trainers for people to learn. And we're not providing them with enough guidance and direction. There's too much sheep dip type approach to learning. So we take people, we put everybody in the organization through a course, and everybody has to do this course. We can tick the box. That only really has viability or credibility now when we're talking about legal compliance. We have to investigate much more about what people already know and how their existing knowledge can be applied in the situation that we want them to apply it. Right? The recognition and reward. We're not recognizing the learning that people have, and we're not rewarding them for learning. We're not recognizing what their new learning enables them to do, and we're not rewarding them for it. This is nothing new. When I first passed my professional examinations, my manager's response was not to congratulate me, but to say, hey, we provided you with a day off, now we're going to get to do your course every week, now we're going to get 5 days of work out of you. It was not really a very positive reaction. Right? But also, we don't reward people. We don't even just sort of say, all right, congratulations, you have now learnt this skill. Learning these skills means we will pay you more for the skills rather than the way in which it's applied. There's no engagement with the learning process with people. Right? We do not engage them in the learning process. We find them very much more, we are going to go through this process rather than saying, what do you know? How can we enhance that? How do we need to get that into the organization? And we make learning difficult to access, difficult to find. We get it so that this is what the training department is going to provide. If you need something different, it takes time to find it. And people are going around the training department, and they're going much more by themselves and finding things which they appear to say, okay, this is the information, this is the knowledge that I need. But actually, as trainers responsible for ensuring that people have the right skills and knowledge and attitudes at the right time in the right place to do the right job for our employers, we have no control over what they are finding on the internet. Until we recognize that that is where they're going to find the information, and whereas we start providing some structure to finding that information, we will not be able to control what they learn. And that's one of the things we need to be looking at. Okay. Now, high performance L&D departments, we look at this comes from PwC. So you need to have less e-learning. They provide 20% less e-learning on average than the normal average e-learning learning and development function. They provide 29% more on-the-job experiences. So a high-performance L&D function is linking people with skills to those without skills and saying, learn on the job. Right? They provide a lot more social interaction. So learning is about sharing what you know with other people. Right? Whether that's online, whether that is with people who are working, sitting around having a cup of coffee. It's about sharing the information that you have with other people who don't have it. But 90% of training takes place when trainees need it, not when the trainer wants to provide it. Okay? So we're looking now, high performance L&D function is providing training for people when they need it, in time, place, when it's needed, rather than when it fits in with a training catalogue and training calendar. Okay? And having a list of training courses for people to attend and then trying to fit them into that training is not going to make the training high performance and not going to lead to the learning and development that people need. So when we then look at other things, we've got organizations like Bain, like Google, like Microsoft, like BP, saying that their trainers need to inspire people to learn, not just hold courses. And that's helping people to identify what their skills gaps are, what they need to do in terms of their learning needs, and helping them search out the information that they need. And that could be simply reading the chapter of the book, reading an ebook, right? Making it very focused and making it very much connected to a learning need. Right? We are not, at the moment, the majority of trainers, able to provide that. It means we have to do much more research and investigation into what we provide, rather than simply saying, teamwork, here is the course, these are the dates when we'll run it. Right? Do it when it's needed, not when it's convenient. Okay. The paths to learning. 69% of people go to their boss or their mentor to find information that they need to know in order to do a better job. Things that they need to improve their skills, their knowledge. 69% of people go to their boss as their first point of call. Very close behind that, 55% of people will look at their internal peers. That's people that they work with, people that they're interested in talking to, people that they respect. But a lot of organizations keep people with skills and talent hidden. They do not have them identified as people that this is somebody who has this knowledge, do you need it? The internet is 47%, and that's people that they don't know, right? No accreditation, no knowledge. Like I say, you can learn how to build a house on YouTube, but it might not last very long, it might fall down. You can also go to Harvard and go through every lecture that is part of the MBA course, but you won't get the accreditation at the end. People will look at specific online resources, but it's 43%, 28% people go to the learning management system of their employers, but people are still looking outside the organization rather than inside the organization. One thing that is disappointing when people look outside the organization is not many of them look to the professional organizations that they're members of. So only 23% of people will look to their CIPD, their accountancy practices, organisations. It's a very small percentage, and it's something that our professional organisations need to learn from. Right? But down at the bottom of the list, as trainers, only a fifth of people come to us when they're looking for learning. Right? A third of the people who will just go to their boss or a mentor or someone, a peer, go there first before they will come to the learning and development department. And then where you should be able to find all the things that people need to know: accredited, valued, checked out, verified learning on the internet, learning management system, again, that is very low. The credibility of learning and development people needs to improve, and that needs to improve by providing learning at the point of need in a way that it's needed. I think that is one of the things that we're looking at in terms of the best approach into learning. Right? So, summary. Right? To be a high-performance learning and development professional, you don't necessarily need to deliver courses. You need to be a facilitator of learning. Be the person who understands where everything is and what sources there will be. If you look at Twitter, Stephen Fry has apparently withdrawn from Twitter, but he was a very good example of someone who said, I have found this. This is useful. This is good. Have a look at this. He helped other people build careers as a result of that in entertainment, but he helped people because he became somebody that was trusted, somebody that found something that was interesting and could actually look at it and say, yeah, he was trusted. That's the type of thing that the learning and development function needs to be. You need to be the facilitator of learning. That's the best approach. Find the information, find the sources, and know where to point people at the right time. You put systems in place and let people get on with it. Right? This is the quote from the people at Google. We have the systems to enable learning. We don't force people to learn. We allow people to learn when it is right for them. Right? Friction-free learning, which basically means make it easy. Right? Don't make access to it difficult. Don't mean that you have to fill in 50 forms. I exaggerate. But you shouldn't need approval to get involved in learning. There may be costs involved, but you can give people budgets for their own individual learning. You can give people points. You spend the points on the courses. If you need access to something, you find somebody else who's already got it. But make sure that access to the learning is as hassle-free as possible. Don't slow the access down. Make sure that the learning is fit for purpose. It's done at the right time, in the right place, in the right way, and meets that person's individual needs. Don't sheep dip people. Inspire the learning. Have your good news stories, the things that people have been able to achieve because they've learned something. Right? Make sure that things happen in the right way. Right? Have a structure to the learning and inspire it. Right? And the guys at BP said that if you engage people in learning, little things are learned every day from which great things are achieved. Right? People learn something new on day 1, day 2, right? They can then add to that, right? And it's not necessarily that they actually realize that they've learned it unless, right, we help them to recognize what they've learned. So an awful lot of what a learning and development function can do in the future is to look at how we bring learners together to discuss what it is that they've learned, to learn from each other. Coffee mornings, lunches. You don't necessarily need to have a structure, but you need to sort of say, okay, what have we learned? It should be part of team meetings. It should be part of conversations that managers have with their employees. Almost like child goes home from school. Parents says, what have you done today? What did you learn today? How did you develop? Having those conversations at work. It comes back to little processes, little improvements. Great things happen from little things. And that, I think, from what I've been looking at and research that I've done, it starts to look at, okay, little things create the big improvements, little learning. That's where we need to be focusing our activities. That's what the best approach is. Making sure that it's fit for purpose, in the right time, in the right place, in the right way. And that comes from having a conversation with the person who is learning. There we go. Right, just a little over the time there, Richard. I'm sorry, but it did fit together quite well. Do you have any comments or feedback? I think people have been quite quiet in the chat group as we've been going through, but